Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of The Progenitor. This is the podcast where we go over a director's entire filmography, talking about themes, scenes, pacing, and give a brief review, all within 30 minutes or less. So let's get started. This next film, I would consider Ridley Scott's attempt at a modern-day Western. Not a Western in general, but a modern-day Western. And who better to get on his side than one of the great American writers, Cormac McCarthy, in his next film. And although it's not truly a Western, you can definitely hear the influences, especially in the score. Next up, we are talking about The Counselor. Now, this film, it's really interesting because stylistically, it looks nothing like any of Ridley Scott's other films. This film feels, looks, and moves almost like a Tony Scott film. And even at the end of the film, this particular movie was dedicated to Tony Scott. During the filming of this movie, unfortunately, Tony Scott had passed away. So this film is dedicated in his memory, as well as the second assistant director, whose name is Matt Baker. This film is actually very much tinged in death and tinged in an ominous feel. You know, it's very much Cormac McCarthy, a very nihilistic point of view about drugs and about the drug industry and the people involved in the industry and just like the cartels and everything in general. So, but it's also tinged in the themes of mortality. And definitely throughout this movie, you feel a foreboding, ominous vibe to it moving into the climax of the film. Now, this film in particular was shot mainly in London, Spain, the Netherlands, and some exterior shots in El Paso. Although this whole movie is supposed to be based in America, they shot like second unit footage and some exteriors in El Paso, but this movie was primarily shot in Europe, which I thought was funny because Ridley Scott does a really intense commentary on this film as well. I think I mentioned it before. And this commentary is really cool because, number one, they have the movie running, and then Ridley Scott's voice pops up, and if it's something of super interest to him, he'll pause the movie, and then it'll go to like a section of him just talking about what happened without the movie playing, and then it'll cut back into the movie where it left off, kind of. So it's really cool. You see some Ridley Grahams and stuff like that. That's his storyboards, which I didn't mention before. Ridley Scott actually storyboards all of his films himself. And, well, I'm sure he has help on the side, but he was a trained artist, trained painter. So, yeah, I really think that's cool about Ridley Scott. Now, let's get into a plot description. You have the counselor, played by Michael Fassbender, and then you just have a bunch of side characters. And basically what's going on is you find out that the counselor wants to marry his girlfriend, Laura, played by Penelope Cruz, but he's running low on cash. Now, he's a lawyer that works with cartels, with gangsters, with drug dealers. So he's got a wide variety of contacts, and one of those contacts is Rainer, who's played by Javier Bardem, and another guy named the Westrape, played by Brad Pitt, who is a collaborator. We'll talk about that later. And basically, what happens is he gets pulled into this drug deal, and he thinks he's flying on top of the world. He flies all the way to Amsterdam to buy a diamond ring. He comes back, proposes, and then all of a sudden everything goes wrong. Like the guy who's supposed to bring in the drugs, and there's a really twisty plot going on, but basically someone hijacks the drugs that were supposed to be sold, and that money later on was supposed to go to the counselor and Rayner. And someone hijacks it, and everything goes haywire, and the cartel wants blood. They're like, where the heck are my drugs? So they go after the counselor, they go after Rayner, and they go after Westray, and they go after Laura, and everything just goes to crap. Everything goes to crap immediately, and not many people survive. So, like I said, very nihilistic, very dark, ominous tone. And it's funny because the film is shot in brilliant lights and a lot of pastels based on the way Rayner dresses. He dresses so flamboyantly. He lives in these crazy mansions. Him and Rayner and the counselor have put some money together to build a club. So it's just like a lot of gaudy stuff going on. But in the core of the film, it's a very basic drug deal gone wrong, and now someone's going to pay, right? And all throughout there's incidentals, side characters, Laura, and there's also Rayner's girlfriend, which I didn't mention, Malkina. And spoiler alert, guess who hijacked the drugs? She did. And she's crazy because, number one, she's got pet cheetahs. And number two, she humps Rayner's car in a crazy scene. I have no idea how to break that scene down to you because it's something you really have to watch. As for a brief review of this film, I enjoyed it. I really did. I think it's one of Ridley Scott's darkest films. It dives into a lot of dark themes, ominous themes, nothing to do with sci-fi, but he gets the point across. It feels like No Country for Old Men and True Romance came together and had a baby. Just like that kinetic energy of True Romance and the foreboding, ominous nature of No Country for Old Men kind of just like blah, came together, and you have the counselor. Now, like I said, cinematography is great. Performances are amazing, especially Javier Bardem and Michael Fassbender. I love Brad Pitt's character, though. He's so cool and so suave in this film. And he's just playing the middleman. He's like, all right, I'm introducing you to this drug deal counselor, so I'm vouching for you. Don't screw it up, right? So unfortunately, something happens, and yeah, a lot of things go wrong, especially for Brad Pitt's Westray. But yeah, let's move on to cast and crew. Oh, by the way, so like I said, I've been rating the films, and I've been giving them places, like placing them in my order, and this is in the top 15. This is actually number 14 currently. By the end of this season, maybe I'll move some stuff around, but I'm pretty close to finalizing my top Ridley Scott films and putting everything in order based on the way I enjoyed them. But yeah, so currently it sits at 14. All right, cast and crew. Crew, directed by Ridley Scott, of course. Produced by Ridley Scott. Nick Weschler. He did Requiem for a Dream. Makes sense. Another drug movie. He also produced Magic Mike, one of my favorite Steven Soderbergh movies. And then you got Steve Schwartz. He produced The Tree of Life, The Road, Killing Them Softly. And Paula May Schwartz. She also co-produced those films. The screenplay, this is actually the first screenplay written by Cormac McCarthy, who had previously written like all these books, The Road, No Country for Old Men. And here's another thing. Ridley Scott had been working on trying to get Blood Meridian made for a long time. Now that's a Western. I haven't read it. I bought it. I can't wait to dive into it, but I heard it's super dark and, there's a lot of scalping going on, stuff like that. And no morals, just like really dangerous people in the old West, not like this modern day Western we're talking about right now. So I really think, Ridley Scott has dabbled in so many different genres that you're waiting for him to do a Western, and boom, here you have a Western, but instead of Indians, you have the drug cartel. Or not Indians, but Native Americans, you have the drug cartel. And instead of horses, you have Porsches and Ferraris and cheetahs. And instead of a cowboy, you have the counselor, So I think it's really interesting. And you have damsels in distresses, and you have, again, strong female characters, which we will get into the themes of the film. Now, going back to the crew, music is written by Daniel Pemberton. This is the first score he's written for Ridley Scott. And I didn't even know this, but he composed Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and The Man from U.N.C.L.E., one of Guy Ritchie's best. Like, if you haven't seen that movie, it's super fun, especially Henry Cavill. Cinematography is by Dariusz Wolski, who's returning from the previous film. What was that? Prometheus. Yeah, Prometheus. Production designed by Arthur Max. Yep, welcome back, Arthur. And edited by Pietro Scalia. You have an all-star cast. You got Michael Fassbender, Cameron Diaz, which is so mind-blowing. She plays Malkina. I remember like falling for her in The Mask. Like in The Mask, she was like super beautiful. And then you have her in Gangs of New York. And you have Javier Bardem, you have Penelope Cruz, Brad Pitt, Bruno Gans in a very awesome cameo, I will say, and Ruben Blades in also a very interesting cameo. And there was one more. There was one more cameo I really enjoyed. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pull her up. Rosie Perez. She plays Ruth. It's a very interesting character that so Ruth is in prison. The counselor is her representative and is trying to help her get on parole. And Ruth's son is called the Green Hornet Racer, and he's the guy who's supposed to like notify when the drugs are coming in, and he gets killed badly. We can talk about that later, but yeah, he gets beheaded by a wire while driving his bike over 250 miles per hour. So, boom. I'm pretty sure it doesn't hurt as much, but dang, just 1 minute, I'm feeling the wind. Next, you're gone. Let's talk about some collabs. Arthur Max, 8th film. Pietro Scalia, 9th film. Dariusz Wolski, 2nd film. Brad Pitt, 2nd film. Now, if we talk about Brad Pitt really quick, he was in Thelma and Louise. And in that movie, he plays a really, sexy looking guy, and he's trying to seduce. I forgot if it was Thelma or Louise, the not as mature one, the one who's married and is trying to escape her dead-end husband. And now he's evolved to like this cowboy wearing like khakis and a cowboy hat, and he's got long locks and a goatee. He's really cool in this film. So he goes from sexy to super cool. And yeah, it's just really cool seeing how he has matured. His face definitely is stronger, more lines, just from age, just from maturity. His performance is even like cooler. He's always kind of chewing on something or eating something. Always has his mouth moving. But yeah, I just he's really cool in this film. As for Arthur Max, this is strange because like he's working in a modern day situation, and it's not like Body of Lies or Black Hawk Down, where, they're in the middle of Morocco and they're shooting like desert areas. There's some really cool scenes in this film. Why don't we get into it? I'm gonna talk about Wife's Corner real quick. I actually didn't watch this with my wife because the first scene of this film is like a 7-minute sex scene. It's super awkward. I actually watched it on my phone at work during lunch, and I was like, oh my god, I forgot how long this thing was. Like, how long the scene was. I was trying to block it from view, but yeah, it's intense, guys. And it's the counselor with Laura, played by Penelope Cruz. Anyways, let's move on. Themes: empower female characters. Ding, ding, ding. Malkina, played by Cameron Diaz, is one of the most diabolical women I've ever seen on screen. She's powerful. She's animalistic. She's got these crazy tattoos. There's this crazy scene where she goes to a church confessional and basically tries to seduce the priest and like talk dirty to him, and then she's in the background planning this heist against her boyfriend, and she knows everything that's going to happen, but she wants the money, which leads us really quick. I'm going to jump around to do not trust rich people and money is coveted. Because think about it, this is a drug deal and a group of drug dealers coming together, putting money together. And guess what? If the drugs don't get sold to the people you're supposed to sell them to, and the money doesn't go to the right people, you're dead. You are gone. And this movie is all about that. And there's also a cool disgusting weapon. I wouldn't say cool, but it's called a bolita, I believe. And basically, it's this contraption. Hold on. Yeah, bolito. It's a contraption that you put over someone's head, and there's like these mechanic gears. Once it goes over the head, you have to like pull this lever, and then this cable starts closing, and these gears start pulling the cable tighter and tighter until it cuts your carotid and then decapitates you. It's crazy. And guess who it happens to? West Ray, Brad Pitt's character. And I gotta tell you, number one, it's a tracking shot of him walking through London because he thinks he's gotten away from the cartel because he's running pretty much. And then randomly he meets this woman. He loves women. He's flirting with them, trying to get a date set up. And then next thing you know, he's walking out and he's walking through the streets, and some guy randomly runs past him, throws the bolito on him, pulls the lever, and boom, you see Brad Pitt fall on the floor. You see him trying to fight it, and then you just see this desperation and then futility, and then he just lets it cut him up. Anyways, yeah. So, yeah, do not trust rich people. Money is coveted. Yeah, that's all here. Then you got the only way to survive is to adapt. Unfortunately, no one actually survives except for Malkina, which makes sense. She adapted. She understands everyone on the game. She understands all the pawns. She understands all the pieces. And she manipulates it to herself so that she can, number one, get the money. And number two, get rid of these people she doesn't really care about. All she really cared about in the first place was the money. Age does not mean a thing. This one I'm not so sure because in this case, most of these characters are pretty much the same age. So let's move on from that. Violence don't solve a thing, brains do. Hey, like I said, Malkina manipulates every single character in this film until she gets the money. Yep. Happy wife, happy life. This one, not so much because although the counselor proposed to Laura, unfortunately, they don't get married. You want to know why? Because the cartel goes after Laura, sends the counselor a video of them going after Laura. She was dumped in a landfill, and it's pretty much a snuff video. So throughout this film, you get all these little insights into the whole world of these characters. Rainer is talking about all the terrible things that could happen as a drug dealer, but you also get insights into every single character. You get insights into what makes a diamond beautiful, what kind of cut, Asher cut, blah blah blah. And that's actually Bruno Ganz's scenes, and those are so eloquently written. You can tell Cormac McCarthy really savors words, you know what I mean? Savors dialogue. And then at the end, near the end, what happens is the counselor's running now. He's running away because he knows the cartel is closing in. And he has someone that he thinks he can talk to that can ease everyone down. And then he wants to negotiate kind of like a life for a life. You let Laura live, and then you can have my life, right? And Ruben Blades gives this amazing soliloquy as the counselor's listening, just saying the futility, and you should have thought these things through, and just basically, these things are over. You did it. It didn't work out. You suffered the consequences. You don't get it your way. And it's just so wonderfully written. Yeah, I don't even know what I was talking about. I think violence don't solve a thing. Happy wife, happy life, definitely. Distrust of authority. This one I'm not so sure. I guess the counselor is the law, right? He represents quote unquote the law, dirty. He is, and he definitely is distrusted by the cartel, and he can't trust anyone. He thought Rayner was a friend, but when the deal goes awry, Rayner kind of just like has, and that's a cool scene too. Oh man, let's talk about scenes. Hold on, let me finish this. Battle of the Sexes. Like I said, Malkina kills everyone. Do not trust robots, androids. There are no robots or androids in this film because it's not a sci-fi film. But I think Malkina actually comes to be really close because she's like freaking cold. She has no emotions, and yeah, she murders everyone. She's sort of like an android, no emotions. The afterlife death, it tinges this entire film, especially when you think about it. Drug deal gone bad, of course the cartel's going to go after you. And basically it's actually Malkina who tries to hijack the drugs that were supposed to be sold, and her people get killed too. So she actually doesn't get the drugs, but she's able to steal Westray's bank codes and pretty much steal his money and siphon the funds to Hong Kong. And I didn't remember those particulars, those last parts that I just said. I actually was trying to do some research on Malkina just now on Wikipedia and read the plot description. And all of a sudden I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so let's talk about some shots. Let's talk about some scenes real quick. Now, I mentioned a couple, and I think the scene where the counselor goes to Amsterdam to buy the diamond and he talks to Bruno Gans, I think that is such a wonderful piece of acting by Bruno Gans. Just talking about his culture, talking about the Asher cuts and the impurities of the crystal or of the diamond. It's just so eloquent. Now, there's this really dope scene where Rainer is trying to drive away from cartel members that are chasing after him, and he's like weaving through the streets, and at the end he dies. Okay, he gets shot. And I really thought that the pacing and the shots for that particular car chase were very well done. I mentioned Westray's death scene. That was great. And any scene with Westray, Brad Pitt's Westray, is just amazing. So well done. The first encounter with Westray, that's really fun. It's in a club, or it's in a bar actually. And let me think. Yeah, just overall, like any scene with Michael Fassbender and Laura cutting out the first 7-minute sex scene or whatever, that went on way too long. But like any of their dialogue scenes, you can see that there's love, but like you don't know if it's organic. It's mainly lust. They really like having sex, pretty much. Malkina has this crazy scene. I particularly don't enjoy it, but she climbs on Rayner's Lamborghini or Ferrari. I forgot which car it was, and she starts like humping it. And there's another scene where Malkina has these two cheetahs, and they're always like running and racing, and you just see the grace of these animals. It's just crazy. And so overall, it's not a pleasant viewing. There's a lot of death. And what I really thought was funny is where they put the drugs. So they put the drugs in the sanitation truck and they put them in these tanks, but they fill the tanks up with crap, like dirty crap. And it's just so gross. And yeah, I can't imagine what that would smell like. But they definitely put on these face masks. Like you could catch COVID in that. But yeah, it's such a dark film. And like I said, if you like true romance and you like No Country for Old Men and you put these together and you put those movies together, you got The Counselor. You got great performances. It moves quickly. Can it get a little confusing? Yes, there's a lot of plot threads, but all you really need to know is the counselor, Rayner, Westray. They make up a they make up a group of investors on a drug deal. Drug deal goes bad. Everyone suffers. Malkina makes it off with a bunch of money. So yeah, I I really enjoy the film. I especially enjoy the unrated cut with the Ridley Scott commentary, like I mentioned before. But yeah, it's definitely worth a view, especially if you've never seen it. This is a much maligned film, too. It got like a 33% on Rotten Tomatoes, which it did not deserve. It deserves far higher. But I think it's just, it's so dark and wordy, and you don't really get that a lot from a Ridley Scott film. Just like the eloquence of the language. So yeah, I think it might have turned some people off, but overall, I definitely think it's worth a viewing. Now, next up, Ridley Scott jumps into the biblical epics, and this is his first biblical epic, and it is the story of Moses with Exodus, gods, and kings. So get a copy of that. It is not streaming for free, so you're gonna have to spend money, $14.99 maybe. But I will say there are some good special features on this Blu-ray, on the digital copy. They have they have an in-depth commentary between the writer of the film and Ridley Scott. So that's always interesting. So yeah, grab a copy and join me next time as we go over Exodus, Gods and Kings.